time it. You've got about a half hour,
Okay.
plus or minus.
So we are now here. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to my thesis defense about if computers could shrug. So just to start us off, I'm going to take you back about 30 years to kind of when personal computers started being a thing. And I'm playing a clip from Halt to Catch Fire, which I feel really helps sum up the point of view of computers.
Are there any questions? I heard it asked you stuff, like it learned your name. Where'd you hear that? That was a little Bug Roger.
So it's fast and it runs all the software, but besides portability, I'm not seeing a lot that's special. Nothing unique.
Unique. Interesting word choice. What are you really asking for? Something special? Give me something warm, something fuzzy? This is a machine. It's not your friend. It's your employee. It works for you. And the way it should be evaluated is thus. How well and how fast does it do the things I ask? Answer instantly. Anything less is a waste of your time. What is the margin of error? Answer, 0. Anything more and you failed. Here's another word, one that's infinitely more important than unique will ever be. Speed. Let's cut through the bullshit and act like adults. You want speed. This machine is the fastest one you've found. Period. You want to play a game with your kid? Join him for craft time in preschool. You want a buddy? Buy a dog. You want to chase rainbows, tilt the room? Walk outside. There are 100 casinos out there built for delusional people like you who think their world is going to change so easily. You want to get something done? Buy one of these.
So it doesn't want to skip.
Hit escape.
Sorry to find the mouse on two. So that takes place about 30 years ago, and he kind of has a point. When computers were first created, the whole purpose was to kind of help out businesses, to make things faster, more efficient, do calculations that would take years for humans to do. However, that's not really the case anymore. Now computers are part of our personal lives and do everything from helping watch our kids to connecting with friends. And so the way we interact with computers really should be changing a lot, and it hasn't quite yet. So kind of just a quick summary of what I'll be going over today. First, kind of looking at what are the current interfaces that we deal with, and kind of what are the issues currently. Secondly, what are kind of some other alternate interfaces that can help solve some of these problems. Then kind of the problem with the reason why we don't use those interfaces and how can we fix that, which will then in the end lead to kind of what is a possible application of everything I've learned through this thesis. So starting off, so most of you, I'm sure, grew up with computers, pretty familiar with them, but they haven't changed in a long time, which is a problem because, you know, they're still very important in our life. I mean, they're a tool. They do a lot of things with us, and we wouldn't have the current society we have today without them. However, there's a big problem is that the fact that tools and our artifacts usually have really deep connections with us. They mean a lot. They tell us a lot. You know, you have your grandfather's watch, and you can tell a story about it. It really means a lot. But you know, your phones and your computers are just kind of there. You don't really have any emotional or personal connection to them, which is very strange considering how much they do for us on a daily basis. And you can see here in the video, this is what personal computers look like. This is kind of the interface. And we skip ahead 30 years, it really hasn't changed. And a lot of people can argue, you have things like touch screens and others, but it's really the same what we call WIMP interfaces. So it's Windows, icons, menu, pointer. And the only difference between kind of the Macintosh from 30 years ago and your smartphone now, excluding things like speed and connectivity, is the fact that the mouse has been replaced with your finger. So it seems kind of silly to think of how much our relationship has changed with computers, and the fact that the way we interact with them hasn't changed. So there should be another way to kind of interact with computers, and we need to start thinking outside of the box, outside of the screen quite literally, for how we can kind of change the way we are interacting with computers. So one of the first issues that are really important to tackle is right now, the way we gain information from computers for the most part is visual. But we as a human species have evolved to have more than just eyesight. And some people are not even fortunate enough to have eyesight. And there's a lot of different ways that we can interact and sense the world, including touch and smell and taste and hearing. And kind of our current devices sort of ignore a lot of those. Secondly, this is one of my favorite quotes: don't design a how for a business, design a how. So we kind of have, they do a lot of things, but it all goes through one source, which is usually your smartphone or your computer. And it's just kind of a problem because something goes wrong with that one device, all of a sudden there's a lot of things you can no longer do. And then lastly, kind of, a lot of people argue with that now we have Internet of Things, and there's a lot of kind of more physical devices and that exist that we use for, but kind of the output of that is still usually a screen. You have your Fitbit, and it tracks your running and all that, but when you go to look it up and kind of understand the data it's collecting, it presents to you in things like graphs, and sometimes they're nice, pretty bar charts, but it's still kind of strictly numbers, which is kind of what the computer's an expert, not necessarily what you're an expert in. So what are kind of some interfaces that kind of take advantage of ways that we're better at for interacting with the world, and kind of what we, before computers existed, like the ways we actually interacted with the real world? So during my thesis, there's three main types of interfaces. First of all, first one's haptic, which is kind of sense of touch, feel, kinesthetic, so understanding where your arm is in relation to yourself. Then tangible, which is interfaces where you have physical devices that you can move around and use that as the input and output for the computer. But lastly, which I'm going to focus on today for my presentation, is organic interfaces, which is something that a lot of people might not be as familiar with as the other two. So organic user interfaces, those are interfaces that are either flexible, the input and output is based on you moving it or changing it. Kinetic, so based on movement and motion, it gives you information and data. And then lastly, shape shifting, so the fact that it can change its form to give you different information. So what are kind of some of the advantages of this? Well, first of all, it's multisensory. So not only can it be visual, but it's haptic. You can feel something move, you can feel the changing in the device. And also it's even, if you want, it can be audio, motors moving, and like something moving against the wind will create sound. Also, because of the fact that it is multisensory, that means that it has two advantages. One, you can either send the information two different ways, so you can have it sent haptically and visually, so the user can use either or. If maybe they're too far away to touch it, they can see the information, or if they have poor visibility, they can feel the information. Also, we can do it so they can be sending out two different messages. So say there's information overload and you need the person to get a lot of different information quickly. You can have one set of data being sent visually while something different is sent tactically. And because this is using two different parts of the brain, you're actually able to understand that information much quicker. Also, a lot of these with the shape-shifting, the kinetic, they are able to be in the background because your eye is very surprisingly quick at kind of seeing slight changes. So it took you maybe about a quarter second to realize that one of the lines isn't straight. And kind of like I was saying before, computers, they understand numbers real quickly. And sometimes numbers are helpful for us, but we don't necessarily really actually need the number. What you need to know is what the number represents. So by using ambient devices, you can understand the information quicker and kind of what you need to know. Also, a big advantage is that devices that can move tend to be seen as more intelligent, which is a big deal because when you get frustrated with computers, I mean, people call it stupid. But when something moves, you're a little bit more forgiving. You kind of form a little bit more empathy for this. I mean, I like to use the image from the Pixar first short film because these are lamps. Everyone knows lamps aren't living. But when you watch this, you still kind of feel empathy for the characters, just totally based on movement. They don't say anything. There's like a few squeaks here and there, but it's mostly just the motion of the devices kind of makes you feel like it actually understands and is more self-aware of the actions it's doing. And then lastly, so with current devices, kind of what you get is what you have to use. So the advantage of something that can change shape is that it can also be aware of its surroundings and change based on what you're doing with it. So for example, your smartphone, you want it to be slim so it fits in your pocket, but then when you pull it out, you have to have it at a certain angle, or you want a certain size so it's easy to hold. And having a device that's aware of its surroundings can make things more ergonomic and easier and more usable for you to use. So if there's all these advantages, what's kind of the thing that's keeping these devices away from market? So first of all, money is a huge issue. Companies like Apple and Microsoft, they have billions and billions of dollars invested in screens. So like their motivation is not as strong to make changes. Secondly, technology. While there's a lot of technology out there, but still being researched, a lot of kind of the devices that change shapes, are low resolution compared to what you can get through a bitmap on a screen. However, if people continue to invest, the technology can move faster. But lastly, one of the biggest issues that a lot of people have is that when they're designing these devices, they're designing them from scratch. And also that means that the users have to understand them from scratch because there's no existing language of what these motions and movements mean to anyone. And so as a designer, that's kind of where I feel that I can add to helping make these devices a possibility. So then the next question is, how do you create a language for these devices? I mean, we already have current UX flows, and people, for example, people see green and they think being, environmental, or red and means danger. So how do you do that with these kinetic and more physical interfaces? Well, luckily, there's already a physical language that exists. body language. Almost all of you use it on a daily basis, whether you think about it or not. And it's really important because we use it for working on teams and collaborating, and what's known as emotional intelligence, which people use because, lots of times what someone says is not necessarily what they mean. And by being able to read people's body language, you can kind of get an understanding of what they might actually be thinking, or what the actual context is of what they're saying, which helps. And when you have a better understanding of your teammates, you can better collaborate because you have a better sense of trust, because you can actually believe what they're saying and not just taking the word for it. And when it comes to trust, computers are the worst. Because you have the ball spinning and you have no idea what's going on or what's wrong. The menu bar says 90% of the way done, and then you're still stuck there waiting for an hour, kind of not knowing what's causing the problem. It has no way of telling you what's kind of going on in its head. So a lot of people have already been experimenting with kind of robotics. It's really popular in androids, and kind of having to make machines, show emotion. And usually because the way humans usually show emotion is mostly through facial expressions. However, there's one huge issue with trying to express facial expressions through machines, and that's known as the uncanny valley. So basically, what the uncanny valley shows is that as a device becomes more expressive and more human-like, people actually start to trust it more. Like I said before, when things move, you have more trust and have a sense that it has intelligence. However, it was noticed that once it's almost human but not quite there, all of a sudden people feel very, very uncomfortable. And the reason for that is that people can sense that something's wrong. They know something's just not quite right. And when you feel like something's giving you fake emotion or fake feelings, it actually has the opposite effect, where you feel like you're being manipulated and you can't trust them because you know something's up. And humans hate to be manipulated. So then I was trying to think, how do we work around this problem? Well, we're not the only animals that use body language. All animals of the animal kingdom use body language. And they tend to use more than just facial expressions. So there's a lot of other attributes, and also it kind of makes it so the uncanny valley isn't as much of an issue because, it doesn't, because people know what a human looks like a lot more than they kind of would recognize slight changes for an animal. And this is what led me to my thesis, which is by creating a collection of user interactions with organic user interfaces that mimic and take inspiration from principles of animal body language that people will be able to more intuitively collaborate with. So then, luckily, when I was trying to figure out what these interactions might be, I'm not the first one to study kind of facial expressions, emotion. Darwin, actually, who is most well known for his book Origin of Species, did a lot more than just kind of studying his theory of evolution. He also looked a lot at actually kind of body language and facial expressions. And I used that to kind of create a kind of notice patterns of kind of some of the more popular ones. So that includes epidermal appendages, so that's things like feathers and hair and other kind of things sticking out of the skin. Posture, which is also common. Trembling, so animals that shake and when they're in fear or tense. Breathing, so speed and how heavy you're breathing. Body size, which is a lot more common in reptiles and fish. Ears, and then tail. So the next steps is, after kind of figuring out what those interactions might be, I wanted to see if people would still understand them if I made them abstract, because I'm not trying to make another Furby. I'm trying to create a language. So, so what I did is the ones I was able to abstract, I kind of made very simplified forms that were kind of just stuck to the basic language that I was trying to test. And then I used this framework. It's called the Circumplex Model of Factors, done by James Russell, who's a psychologist in the 80s. And basically, he stated that there's lots and lots of emotions. So instead of asking everyone every single emotion, there's kind of emotions to be put on this 2x2, which is the vertical axis is the energy, so how much energy is behind the emotion, and then the horizontal axis is balance. So on this side, you have negative, and the other side is positive. So using that, I was able to kind of stick to just 8 quadrants and asking people what the emotions are, and trying to predict based on by using Darwin's book and what he says certain actions, what emotions they typically mean. I wanted to see if people would guess the same emotion when working with this abstract form of the language. And then by using that, I analyzed it to see kind of strengths and test to see how close they were to the predicted one, or if there was another type of emotion they understood, and then trying to figure out which were the strongest, so the devices that people agreed the most on, and then secondly, the closest to prediction. That way it kind of followed the thesis of being able to people understanding body language in an abstract form. And from there, I chose 3 that I felt were strongest: epidermal appendages, posture, and breathing, which is currently what I suggest if people, if you want to create an organic user interface. These are kind of, from my research, the top 3 kind of use as necessarily, not to use all of them, but kind of as a stepping stone that just help you get started. That way people aren't designing from scratch every time. So then the last thing I'd like to show you all is, so I figured out what this language could possibly be and some of the ways that people can interact with these physical devices. So what's kind of an example of it? And what I really wanted was something that everyone could relate to. And so one thing that you all did before getting here is getting dressed in the morning. And there's a lot of factors that go into getting dressed. What you're doing today, like I'm giving a presentation, so I'm wearing a collared shirt. But then also things like typically the weather. So I'm sure, I had to roll up my sleeves because it's really a little bit too hot to have long sleeves in the current weather. So there's a lot of factors. And I decided to kind of focus on the fact that that's the weather, because there's a lot of numbers that go into it, and that's something that computers, like I said before, computers are really good at numbers. So kind of the way it is now. So let's just ask you real quick. Siri, do I need a jacket today? So if you didn't hear it, it says the low temperature will be 72 degrees today, which is not really answering the question that I just asked it. And while, yes, I mean, a lot of people have been accustomed to this way of, getting dressed in the morning, it's still your job to understand what that number means to you. So I'm sure people have had days where they decide that, I think it was cold yesterday, so I'm going to wear a jacket today. And then they go out and it turns out to be warm and you're stuck around carrying a jacket. Or you're like, it wasn't so bad yesterday, I think I could be without a jacket, and then you're stuck freezing and trying to jump from building to building so you don't get hypothermia. And so from there, I was trying to think of, so how can computers help us out in a way that's a little bit more meaningful? So yes, drum roll. So I decided to make a co-rack. This co-rack, it's something that we use, and the big advantage about the idea behind organic user interfaces is that the items in the physical form are still useful. So even if it's not necessarily giving you data, it still serves a purpose. And it's not, like this is just currently working as a paperweight right now, because when it's off, it can't do anything else. And so the idea is that computers, they have access to data like Weather API, and also understand the trends of which, say it's in the future and your clothes have a Bluetooth connected device that kind of can record through sensors what type of weather you typically wear it in. And then from there, it will, using a kinetic interface, which I'll show you in a moment, can kind of guide you towards and suggest which jacket to wear. And then, it uses its knowledge of which jacket you usually wear in which weather and understands that. And then you're able to use your own knowledge because, while computers are really good at numbers, humans are really good at kind of the big idea and big picture. And they have a better idea of kind of what's proper to wear when, activity-wise. And then so then you can choose a jacket, and then as you're wearing it, it'll continue to collect data and learn and have a better understanding of what your personal choices are in different conditions. So to show you, so let's say it's 40 degrees out, so it's a little chilly. Hope this works. So as you can see, what it does is that basically, so this is, as you can tell, because it's faster, it's more anxious. It's kind of like your mom being like, you better grab this jacket or you'll catch your death of cold. So I'm just going to allow the people who are watching online to see this. Oh, wait. It's really confusing. That's this one. There we go. Can you see here? Then say the weather changes, so it gets a little warmer. So now the computer's kind of like, it records that, it knows this is a heavy one, and, maybe sometimes you wear it in this weather, but usually not. Typically you wear one of the two lighter jackets, and it's kind of telling you that, because it's both see so much speed, you still have the personal choice of which jacket you necessarily wear, because even though temperature-wise they're same, then you're taking into account your own decisions of which style you want today. If you want something kind of cleaner and more sports-like, or just something a little bit more casual. And then the last one, so there's a lot of other factors that go into weather than just the temperature. There's things like wind chill and rain, and obviously precipitation's a big one. So it can also use that and take that into account. In this case, it's choosing the rain jacket, and it's like, maybe if you really want this jacket, you can take it, probably because it's reported the fact that, these two jackets don't have hoods, but this one does. And sometimes if it's not raining too hard, you just want to cover your head, you don't necessarily care if it's a waterproof jacket. So just what I want to end with is that the purpose of this presentation is not trying to start a war on screens. I'm not saying that graphic user interfaces aren't useful to us and there aren't places for it. However, what I think is really important for people to get out of this is that there are other options that exist. There's a lot of different interfaces that are being researched into that can kind of help us out in different ways. And because as designers, it's really important we understand what these options are, because we need to keep in mind that we're creating the best solution for the user and not necessarily the best solution for the particular device. That's all. Thank you. So, questions, comments?
So I noticed when you turned on the co-corrector, they were making sounds as they were moving. Was that intentional?
You mean like the kind of,
The kind of
that's because, it's just the servos themselves, and the fact that it's hard to get the tolerances perfect
right.
when you're creating by hand. So it's not necessarily on purpose. However, like I was saying before, it also, the fact that you can hear that's moving, you know, like without even being in the room, if you're able to hear those servers, you know it's on, which means that you're already keeping in mind that you might need a jacket today. So that's kind of goes with, you know, just like with these, I mean, none of you came up, like all you figured out the information visually by seeing it, but you know, you can put your hand up against it, say if you are blind or have visual impairment, you're able, and then also you're able to kind of hear. It might be a little hard to figure out which one's making the noise, but you do know that you should be paying attention to it. But it's like not so loud and disruptive that it's kind of getting in the way of your morning routine.
I just wondered. It was actually really soothing. So I was like,
Why didn't those blink versus move?
So the reason I had them move, mostly just because my thesis was related to movement and kinetic. Kind of the motion, it's actually nice that you said that. It was soothing because that's kind of the advantage of like the breathing. It makes it more, makes things feel more alive and relaxed because you kind of breathe in, breathe out, because known for it. And there's definitely the possibility for other designs to have it. You know, it can have multiple, like I said, it's good to have multiple outputs. So it could blink if we wanted. However, kind of, if say it was only visual and blinking, you know, you have to be looking directly at it, or it doesn't kind of, you know, you wouldn't probably necessarily get that same soothing feel of the breathing motion as well. But
The code should be attached to the part that moves. So it hands it to you. So it's, hey,
yeah, that was when I was brainstorming. One of the ideas I had was being able to have the book itself move. Two reasons I didn't chose it is one, you know, I would have had to make sure that I had power enough, pull enough servos that they could easily lift the weight of the jacket and the uniform motion. And secondly, because if it didn't move enough, you might not necessarily see the jacket moving. But I mean, that's definitely. I mean, there's many options. This isn't kind of the end all of coat racks. More of a conversation starter. Kind of start thinking of how this could be in our regular everyday lives.
Do you see this always moving, or does it turn on a certain time of the day, or when you check the weather?
I mean, I'm seeing it more of kind of like, I use Nest as an example a lot because Nest kind of, you have multiple devices and it knows, the jacket knows if it's far away. So, I mean, if you're outside of the home, it knows to turn off, as opposed to, or there's also the possibility that, you can kind of have settings on it. So, because when you first get a jacket and first add it, it's not going to know anything. So you still have to input some data as far as what you believe your preferences are. And then again, the computer can kind of learn on its own what's more useful to you, and kind of have the computer worrying about that and not having you worry about it.
Is this a representation of something for the future, or is this actually what you consider the solution to your problem? Because what I'm saying now is it's not very practical to use. I would just wonder how you would install that in your home.
So
you can I have myself like 10 jackets. You know what I mean? So would you have like a giant wall of 10 different hooks?
I mean, certain people have certain needs. Not everyone. Some people do bipolar racks, some people don't bipolar racks, and so for the purpose of this is kind of, like I said before, it's more of a conversation starter, not necessarily the end all of what I believe will be in everyone's home. As far as like how far into the future it goes, I don't see it as that far into the future. I think a lot of the sensors that are needed for it are pretty soon. I think kind of the way I made it work with servos, I mean, there's other ways you can motion that would be smaller and more compact and better for hanging up on a wall. But and those are some of the problems. It is in my paper. I understand that sometimes people like to put multiple coats on the same coat rack. There's also the issue of multiple people living in the same home. So those are kind of designs that before this becomes manufactured that we'll have to go to and problem solve. However, what I really want is just kind of get people thinking and seeing that there's other ways to understand data and learn about and have the computer relay data to you, besides just having to look at your smartphone every morning and kind of interpreting for your own needs.
Well, I guess that's what I'm asking you. It's just that motion of in and out. Is that the main core of the
Yeah, I mean, like my thesis, it's more about the language itself. With my literature review, I wasn't in primary review. I was really looking deeply into how people understand the weather and code racks. What I was looking into is the interfaces and how people interact with it and how people try to understand the information that's being relayed by the computer.
I think a great thing is one of the three top responses from your systems.
Mm-hmm.
Have you think about that may be affected by other considerations since the method you use
Mm-hmm.
like attached to other body's arm, and instead of breaking, it's more like action.
Yeah, I mean there's lots of ways you can have it. It can be a wearable. It can be a separate, it could be more kind of a smartphone type device where it's just a multi-purpose tool that gives you a lot of information, or it can be like this where it's tied directly into a product that is related to what it's trying to tell you. And that's kind of the whole idea. Is it's supposed to be a starting. What I really want is kind of a stepping stone for designers to use to kind of have these interactions in mind and kind of already have a basic understanding of what they typically need. Sorry. That way, when they're designing, the idea is to kind of reduce the learning curve on one, how to create a language, and also then having the users have to learn all over again. So when I was doing my research, a lot of the issues that people are trying to overcome with kind of haptic devices and all these devices is that there's no standardized language, as opposed to kind of vocal, like, we have English language or Mandarin, or there's like languages that exist that people understand how they use them, and that doesn't quite exist. I mean, it does exist basically through body language, but people weren't necessarily kind of getting into that before when they were creating interactions. They're kind of still stuck in the mindset of trying to take a visual interaction and make that a little bit, more 3D, as opposed to kind of something totally different.
I wrote down a note.
Mm-hmm.
A product or a physical thing gets in the way of communication. This is a physical thing that gets in the way. It comes between me talking to someone else. Wouldn't it be great if I don't even need this, and I'm talking to McCabe where he is flying around the world, and I say, hey John, I know you're coming back from wherever. Nathan's giving his presentation. And that's all I have to do. But what's interesting here, you want to know when you ask the question, what do I need to wear today? Tears came back and said, 72 degrees or something. And then you've got to go through this whole battle. Well, what did I wear? The last time it was 72. What 72 feel like? And now I wore that coat last time. It was warm enough. Where something like this skips that whole process, and it knows. I mean, what you really want to know is what piece of clothing do you have to wear. You don't want to have to know what did you wear last week, all of that kind of thing. So this skips that whole process. You walk up to it or whatever, it hands you, it knows what the temperature is today, whether it's raining, snowing, whatever, it hands you that. So it's a way of, different way of giving you exactly what you want without you really have to think of it. Self-driving cars.
Yeah. No, and it's definitely what you said, kind of the idea of having other more physical interfaces. It's kind of being able to, instead having this kind of mediator between you and the digital world, it's kind of the idea of bringing them back into the physical world, and what's called, Fjord calls it no UI. It's also Weiser has the idea of ubiquitous computing, where it's kind of computers. We're in the age of personal computing, where it's like you have a computer for you to interact with. The idea of ubiquitous computing is, there's hundreds of small computers that don't necessarily do everything, but they do what they, like I said, creating a hive of little computers everywhere that kind of just do what you need to do without getting in the way of, your everyday life, and helping you kind of more directly interact with the world instead of having to pause and take a break and having another device in front of you.
I know you all can't live without your phone. 2 years from now, this will be as exciting as that piece of wire. The wire is communicating. Mm-hmm. This is basically the same thing. It's a conduit to communicate. Is it exciting? Well, I tell folks that 10 years ago, if I said design a handheld phone, and if they had showed me something that looks like this, I would have flunked it. I said, come on, you've got to be out of your friggin' mind. Who's going to buy this little piece of plastic? But it's not physically just what it is. It's functionally what it does. But that piece of wire will be as exciting, or this will be as exciting as that. Something.
That's the hope.
Yeah. Anything else? Nathan, thank you very much.